going on, everyone? Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Laura Robbins, the author of the best-selling memoir Stash, which is the story of her drug addiction with Ambien. So today we're going to talk about her memoir, why it's a success, and a bunch of other things pertaining to race relations, like reparations, affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, even immigration and gun laws. So if you're interested in this conversation, be sure to stay tuned and watch the whole thing. And if you like free-form, open discussions like this, without all the nonsense, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's get into the interview. All right, what up, Laura? Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I was lucky enough to have an aunt that hosts book meetings, and that's how I met you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are?
Yeah. No, it was great meeting you then. I flew up to Oakland for the day to do a one-day memoir retreat, where because I teach memoir writing, and you were there just kind of, setting up and then getting out of there. And it was really nice to connect before you left. So I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, I'm a writer, and I wrote a book called Stash, My Life in Hiding, which was released. It was launched last year, March of 2023. And it's doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Bestseller. It's been in the New York Times a few times, and it was named Best Memoir of 2023 by Elle Magazine and Real Simple. And so I'm really just on that book journey. I just turned in my second book, so I am cementing my career as an author by continuing to write. So.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest articles I saw when I would go through your podcast's website is, do we need another drug addiction memoir?
Yes.
And so what do you think made your book so much different? Is it your writing style? Is it just the examples, like the path of your specific story? What do you think made it have the success it did?
Well, I think that a couple of things. I think that the summer of 2020 created a need for more Black authors, directors, writers, etc. There was I don't know what word to call it, but it was immediately these authors, these writers, these directors, these projects went to the top of the list. We were prioritized during that summer. My book was sold in the summer or the end of the summer of 2021. So right on the heels of that. Mm-hmm. So I just mentioned that to say that maybe my book wouldn't have sold if it had come out now. And it might not have done what it did if people weren't prioritizing Black projects.
Okay.
It's possible that it would have, but maybe it wouldn't have. I think that there was a little momentum behind me.
Totally.
And the other thing is my book is an addiction memoir, but it's also told from the intersection of privilege and race. So you see a lot of addiction memoirs and they deal with like prostitution and drug dens and
like real hardcore when you think of drug addict, down and out, kind of homeless, just rugged.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's not my story and it's not part of my story. So I think that was another thing that set me apart was I had this really fancy life. When I'm during the period that I'm writing about, it was mansions and private planes and nannies and housekeepers and drivers and all that stuff. So that's the life I was living then. And so that doesn't really fit with what one thinks about when one thinks about addiction or junkies or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of an addiction story, I think of someone going off the rails, becoming homeless, doing drugs in the street, needles, all of that. But you kind of have what seems like the pop star drug addiction, like the Eminem drug addiction. And I know we were talking about music. You can relate to Eminem and you like Eminem. So what's your story for people who haven't read your book? What was your life before your addiction? The first reason why you got onto Ambien, which was what you were addicted to.
Yeah.
The story through addiction, getting off. What's the roadmap for us?
I mean, there's a really long roadmap, which I won't get into the whole thing. But, prior to becoming addicted to Ambien, I was just a mom. I was a mom who had closed her PR company so that I could raise my children. My now ex-husband and I decided that somebody's going to raise our kids. We wanted it to be one of us.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it. So I shuttered my company. He continued to work. And my kids were, what they call spirited children now, but they were just massively energetic. and, and it was really hard to keep up with them. And I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I think that I had undiagnosed postpartum anxiety.
Okay.
And I only say this because after my second one was born, I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I tried, they tell you to sleep when your babies are sleeping.
Yeah.
And, I would get them to sleep. And then I was so attuned to any kind of pre-whimper wake up noise they would make, like pre-wake up whimper rather. So if they were just stirring in their, wherever they were sleeping, the crib or the bassinet, I was up anticipating that I was going to have to get up. Instead of just sleeping until they actually woke up. And I couldn't help it. And so I was pretty fried a little while after my second one was born. And my doctor was pretty stunned by my appearance when I showed up at his office. And he's like, let's get you sleeping, and then we can see if there's anything else happening. And so he gave me Ambien, and I had never heard of it. It was 2008. It was probably a popular drug, but not as popular as it is now. Like everybody knows about Ambien now. And I took that first one the first night, and it was like, I describe it like having an alarm bell ringing in your head 24/7 for a year. And then all of a sudden there was silence when I took that Ambien.
It's like the Chinese water torture where it's drop,
yes,
and then all of a sudden it just silence.
It just like,
okay.
And I had the best night's sleep I think I've ever had in my life that night. And I woke up the next day and I had 2 words in my head, and it was, again, please.
Ooh.
Like, I want to do that again. But I rationed them out. I had a bottle of probably 30 that lasted me for about 6 months.
Oh, so you weren't at first. It was just
at first.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the second year after I was prescribed them, I was taking them every night. And then after going into the third year, I was taking 1.5 to get to sleep, because it wasn't I was building up a tolerance.
And did your doctor recommend to up the dosage, or did you just decide I'm going to up it?
Both. At first, he was like, well, maybe you can just increase the bedtime dose that you're taking by a quarter or by a half. And the other thing about me is I present really well. Even when I was at the rock bottom of my addiction, I was still dressed, like makeup and hair, like I drove a nice car. Like I was not somebody that you would suspect or figure you need to watch out for.
So it almost sounds like the reason why it's been so popular is because it's the story of almost the middle class addiction, not necessarily middle class, but the everyday American who might get prescribed something for pain or sleep or anxiety and then just hooked. It's like almost a memoir that reveals how horrible the pharmaceutical industry is. Do you get into that at all? Do you talk about that?
I do not talk about that. And honestly, I think Ambien is a really good drug. It's meant to be prescribed for a 10-day period.
Okay.
And it's really effective for that period. For me, one, it did something that it doesn't usually do to people, which has got me high. Most people don't get high off Ambien.
And how would you describe that high feeling that you wanted, again, please?
Yes. I call it like warm golden oil filling my throat and head and spreading through my body, like sinking into dark velvet, swirling down into it, like watching troubles float away somewhere where I can't see them anymore. Yeah. It was euphoria for me.
Yeah, like so almost out of a music video, how someone will disappear. Okay.
Yes.
And then so you started taking it more and more, and then when did it become, like at that point, would you say it was a problem, or when did it become a problem?
It was a problem about 3 years in, but it wasn't a problem I couldn't handle.
Okay.
It became a problem I couldn't handle anymore 6 years after that first one.
So you were on it for 6 years. Usually a 10-day period is what it's meant for, but then 6 years.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And so, yeah, 6 years of now doctor shopping. So I'm not only going to my doctor, but I'm also going to my psychiatrist, who I got specifically so that I could get drugs from. I'm going to my OBGYN. Like I'm going to, I think that's all the doctors I had then. I think I just had those too.
Yeah.
But I'm also getting Ambien from them, which is something you could not do nowadays because everything's computerized and it's cross-reference and yeah. But then I could, and I got away with it for a while.
Okay. And so Dope Soul, well, this quick segue into Dope Soul. So what is Dope Soul?
Well, I just like this sweatshirt.
So that's not your personal brand or anything?
No,
Okay.
no, it's not. It should be.
Yeah,
It
I
should be.
was like,
Save it to me, and I just really like it. You know, dope is one of those expressions that I used in the 80s, right?
yeah.
And then in the 90s, and I still use it because I have a lot of that slang still in my vocabulary. And you know, soul is so many different things. This your soul, like the soul, your spirit, your being, your essence, and it's also just the music, which I love.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about music in a little bit, but okay, back to the story. You're 6 years in, that's when it starts to actually become a problem. How so? How is it a problem?
Well, you know, by the end, I was taking up to 10 Ambien per day.
Oh,
and people always do that. And I say up to because it wasn't 10 every day. I mean, that was a really good day if I could get 10 Ambien a day.
Good day. It's okay.
That was a good day for me if I could get 10 whole Ambien. And I was rationing them out. I was also parent association president at this time. I was, you know, a volunteer in my kids' library. I was, you know, a room mom. So I was very present on campus during this time, and I couldn't take Ambien during the day or else I would fall asleep.
That was going to be my question. Were you able to take it during the day and just feel a high? Okay.
No. So I would have to figure out how to get through these days where I was in withdrawal, like excruciating withdrawal. Like if you imagine the worst flu you've ever had and the aches and the, you know, the fever and the chills and the shaking and the, you know, and times that by 1,000. Like that's what the withdrawal was like.
And the withdrawal was every day that just
every day I didn't have something in my system, I was in withdrawal.
Shit. Okay.
Yeah. But I was still, you know, fooling all these people. I was still the parent association president. I was still giving speeches. I was still managing committees. I was still, you know, manning the library when the librarian went on break. I was still bringing hot lunch. So I was doing all these things, but as soon as I could, which was as soon as my kids went to sleep at night, I was just eating Ambien, as many as I could.
Like actually taking one at a time, waiting for an effect, or just pop literally 5 in the mouth?
No, probably 3 to get to sleep and then wake. And so now I was waking up. It only kept me asleep for a few hours at a time. So I would wake up maybe twice in the night and take more.
Okay. And that would happen. Yeah. So that's how you get to maybe 10 is you do 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And so at what point did you decide this is a real problem? I need to stop. I need to get off. What happened in your life to have that catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, there were a few times that someone who was observing me would have said, "Oh, that's her bottom for sure. Like now she's going to stop." And I didn't stop during those times. When I stopped, or actually when I made the decision to stop, because I didn't actually stop then, was on July 4th of 2008. Okay. We had a beach house in Malibu, my ex-husband and I had taken my kids by myself. He was working on location, so he wasn't around. And I'd taken them out there because we could watch the fireworks from out there. Someone would, you know, rent a barge. And so anyway, it's a really good view of the fireworks. And I was in such excruciating withdrawal that I couldn't take them. I had to send them with a neighbor. After they left, I took everything I had, which wasn't much. I thought I had a lot more at that Malibu house because I kept stashes at each house, at our house in the city and the house in Malibu. And I washed it down with vodka, which was another thing I was doing to boost the effect.
Damn.
And I took Benadryl, which was another thing that I was
Oh.
doing to boost the effect.
So this is
And
the combo for kids.
yeah,
Okay.
don't do this at home, kids.
Shit.
It's lethal, actually. It's no joke. It's a lethal combination. I should have been dead. And it didn't get me high. Like, it didn't do anything. It didn't take the edge off. And I had taken everything that I had, and I just sat there on the floor and I cried. And I was like, first of all, what am I doing? I'm a mom. Secondly, I can't get loaded and I can't be sober because I'm just in pain all the time. So I'm going to have to get off of these. I'm going to have to get off this roller coaster, off this ride. And so I made the decision that night to check myself into treatment.
Okay. And then can you tell us where that treatment was, how that worked?
Yeah. I went to the Meadows in Wickenburg, Arizona.
Okay.
Which is if you Google it, there are quite a few celebrities who have gone there to get off of Ambien, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I mean, at that time it was, like I said, it was brand new. This has been since I checked in. But yeah, it's a long-term facility, 30 to 90 days, in the middle of nowhere in Arizona.
Arizona is the middle of nowhere.
Right? And Wickenburg is literally like there's one CVS, like there's one movie theater, like, it's one of those places. And I checked myself in there for 30 days and got off of Ambien.
And how'd that go? Was it a cold turkey, or did they slowly figure out what you need a day to, keep a little bit of the withdrawal symptoms down?
Yeah, they were really afraid of me having a medical emergency if I just cold turkeyed it. So they weaned me off. I was on what they call a medical detox for 11 days, and then I was off everything.
Damn, okay. And then what was that 11 days like? I'd imagine you talk about it in your book. Was it just hell?
It was hell and hazy. I was, the detox drugs just made me sleepy, but I still had to go through all the paces during the day. There's everybody eats at the same time. Everybody goes to these different groups at the same time. Everybody goes to counseling at the same time. Men and women aren't allowed to engage with each other. Like, they're really strict, but you're not allowed to not participate in stuff. So I feel like I just kind of slept walk through those first few days. And I was in between crying jags. I was missing my kids. I'd never been away from them that long. And that was killing me.
Okay. And so did you stay 30 days, 90 days?
I stayed 30 days. Okay.
So was that, you think, relatively fast? You were proud of that? You weren't there for 90 days? Or did you even care how long
I was not going to stay there for 90 days. It's like, that is not happening. They didn't recommend that I did, but I was all ready if they had. I was going to say, nope, I'm not doing it.
So,
I didn't.
Okay. So now you're off. We see you were functioning normally until it was just the withdrawals were too bad because you were staying sober throughout the day. Then when you're finally sober, you go back to where you live. Are you the same person as you were before? Or how much different do you think you are now?
I mean, that was the hardest thing I've ever done, is to leave my kids and go there. That was like, tearing flesh off, taking an arm off. I mean, I've never done either of those things, but that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
It was that painful. But it was really, really, that's a close second. Coming home was as painful, or close to being as painful. And all I wanted was to be in my bed, because the beds there are terrible. I wanted to be in my bed, and I wanted to snuggle with my kids. Like, that's all I wanted the whole time I was there. And then when I got home, everything felt so foreign. I felt like I didn't know how to do anything, even snuggle with my kids.
And why do you think that was? Like, you were so used to functioning with Ambien, or?
I just think that I was really ashamed. I think I was consumed by it. I think I had been juggling for so long, and nobody knew what was going on. I mean, nobody knew. Like, even my now ex-husband, he didn't know what was going on. And the doctors didn't know, because the three of them were prescribing to me, but they weren't talking to each other. My friends didn't know. Nobody at school knew. Like, nobody knew. but everybody knew I went to treatment.
Ah,
And so it's like all the balls came down all around me. The balls that I had been juggling
yeah.
were no longer in the air, and I felt exposed and embarrassed and ashamed,
Like vulnerable even.
guilty. Yeah, all those.
Criticism, judgment.
Yes, yes.
And so,
So I was scared to face people that I hadn't seen since I'd gone to treatment. I was embarrassed to continue being the PA president because I had a year in front of me, almost a year in front of me to do this, a school year anyway.
okay.
And yeah, so it was pretty excruciating,
And so,
honestly.
what'd you do to overcome all of those emotions and to actually get your life back? Because I imagine now you have your life back, you're in full swing. What did you do? How did you overcome it? How did you get back to the normal?
Yeah, I don't think I ever got back to the normal because the normal for me was I didn't really have a normal,
Mm,
anymore. The normal that I had when my kids were little, when I was taking Ambien, wasn't available to me. And the normal that I had when they were little, when I wasn't, I was, anxious and not sleeping. And then pre that, I didn't have kids. So
yeah.
I didn't really have a normal. But what, normal as an average to the population, um, you know, it was just hard. I had a lot of things to do. Because I was getting divorced, and my divorce attorney suggested that I do drug testing twice a week, so that if anybody called my sobriety into question, we would have documented evidence.
Mm,
That was humiliating and took up a lot of time, but I did that. I met with my divorce attorney a lot. I went to, sober friends meetings, recovery groups. I went to those a bunch, like 3 times a day. I hated them.
mm.
I stepped back. I left early. I didn't talk to anybody, but I went. And, just slowly, slowly, like agonizingly slowly over time, things started to not be so hard.
Mm.
I don't think I felt better until I was well into my second year of sobriety.
Okay. And better, not even in the sense of normal, but just, would you say happy now, able to sleep? I mean, how was your sleep at, like, as soon as you got out for that year, 2 years? Like, did you take, like, NyQuil? Like, what? Or were you just like, I'm done? How'd you sleep?
Yeah, that was really interesting because that was like I was terrified of not sleeping. That was like my whole reason for continuing. Like I say, I'm never going to sleep again. I can't stop Ambien because I will never be able to sleep. And if I can't
Mm.
sleep, then I can't be a mom and I can't. And so I was really scared of that. And I got set up with this new therapist when I left the Meadows. They recommended her. She was this great woman. She was Greek and she had this really thick Greek accent. And she said she was basically like the anti-alarmist. So when I
Yeah.
came in, I said, I'm terrified that I won't sleep. She's like, oh, you might not. She's like, good. Your kids are asleep. Use that time. That'll be your own time. Get some books that you love. Get some cocoa. Get some movies that you've been wanting to see. Watch the
Mm.
movies. Drink the cocoa. Read the books. Just use the time. You
So
might not sleep at first.
So it seems like one of the most powerful things was help you with a language shift. How are you relating
Yeah.
to everything, the frames of what you saw stuff? Before
Yeah.
was a curse, something almost you were scared of not falling asleep. Now it's a not necessarily a gift, but it's an opportunity to do.
That's how she saw it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Wow.
I didn't quite see it that way, but I did what she suggested. I did everything except for the cocoa because I didn't want to have to like get up and use the restroom in the middle of the night. And I got my books and I put on a movie. And Kenny, I got to tell you, I was asleep
Mm,
by probably like 1:30 the first night, which was a miracle. And
mm.
I slept until the morning. And then the next night I fell asleep around midnight and slept until the morning. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I could not believe I was sleeping. And honestly, I haven't. Do I have wood? I have wood. Oh, this is wood. Had a bout of insomnia where I couldn't get to sleep since. And this has been almost 16 years.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think
Yeah.
that shifting of it's an opportunity to now do stuff got you thinking about other things, got your mind distracted, and actually got you tired out? You started to do stuff. How do you?
I
Why do you?
think Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was just a shift in mindset and a different way of looking at it, because the reason I can't sleep when I'm anxious is adrenaline, right? I have adrenaline coursing through my system. The
Yes.
moment I look in the clock and think I have to be up in 3 hours, adrenaline starts shooting through my system. And then I really can't sleep because I'm on an upper, basically. I'm on a stimulant.
Mm-hmm.
And so to quiet that adrenaline or to not let it start means I'm not expecting to sleep, right? So I'm not going to be anxious that I'm not sleeping. So there's no adrenaline rush to
Yes.
come out.
That change of
And
perspective. It
yeah,
seems like because you were fearful, that fear that was your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, you're up. She basically helped you see a way to relate differently to then activate your parasympathetic and chill
yes,
out, right? Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, how do you think this book relates to more, like, is it doing so well because it relates to more people in this everyday addiction that most people see that's kind of hidden?
I think that it's doing well with moms specifically.
Because you're the mom
Yeah.
example. Okay.
I think that moms are really connecting, even if they've never had an Ambien, they're connecting to the role exhaustion of being a mother, everything that comes along with being a mom or being the kind of mom I wanted to be. There are all different kinds of ways to parent, but the kind of mother I wanted to be was all hands on deck, doing everything, watching everything, being everything. And there was an exhaustion that came with that a lot of mothers are familiar with. And a lot of mothers who are in that place take comfort in something, whether it be shopping or an affair
Yeah.
or, like they do other things to take that pressure off. So they connect with me needing this one thing so that I could still continue to show up and be super mom, which is what I thought I was.
You think the reason why your book was a success was because of after 2020? I'm imagining it was all the protests after George Floyd died. So
Yes,
let's talk a little bit about race and stuff.
I'm down. I'm down. What do you want to talk about?
So, what's been the most controversial opinion that you write about, that you talk about race, that you think we could revisit?
I've had so many. And I actually haven't looked over my articles in a while, but I mean, I think the ones. So basically, the way it works is I write articles for a Huffington Post,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a tabloid. There's a certain type of readership that reads the Huffington Post. It's not elegant. It's not Vogue. It's not. It's not Harper's Bazaar. It's not Vanity Fair. It's Huffington Post.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is to write about topics which will create conversation, right?
Conversation. Okay. Kind of
And,
crazy conversation. Get
yeah.
people riled up. Yeah. Okay.
Well, really, the crazier, the better for them,
Yeah.
because then those articles is passed around and they get shared and their viewership is up.
Yeah.
So
let's do some of that now.
Yes. I was really trying to create an author's platform, and I didn't have any published articles. And so with Huffington Post, I found a way to create a series of articles, get my name out there, and therefore create an author's platform. The easiest way for me to get published there is to write about race.
Because you're Black, George Floyd, as you were saying.
Yeah, well, just because they'll publish it, pretty much, especially if it's topical. So what I do, I love the news. Actually, that's a weird statement. I
Yeah.
love the news, but I watch the news. I actually record the news on like a DVR on like regular TV, and I watch it later if I miss it. So I don't like to miss the news, like the actual beginning to end with an anchor at a desk telling the news of the day. Like that's the news I watch instead of just like on my phone. And so I'll watch the news and see what people are talking about. And then I'll pitch a subject to Huffington Post and say, like, what if everybody's talking about critical race theory? What if I wrote an article about critical race theory? Would you be willing to publish that? If they say yes, I get going. There's a ticking clock then. If they say yes, I have about 36 hours to turn in a finished article.
Okay.
And so that includes research. So I usually do a little bit of research before I pitch them in case they say yes, so that I'm not too far behind. But critical race theory, that was definitely one of my most debated articles. And I think, you and I had talked about this before, but when I actually wrote that article, I didn't know much about critical race theory.
Yeah.
I knew a little bit about it. I was under the false impression, like so many people are, that critical race theory was basically telling Black history, the history of Black Americans in this country. And so to me, it was saying, should we teach the history of Black Americans in school or not? So I was definitely pro teaching the history of Black Americans in school. Right. So that's the perspective from which I wrote the article. But the truth is, critical race theory is not teaching the history of Black Americans in school. In fact, it's a survey course that's usually offered at the upper level of graduate school or law school, where people learn a theory. It's a theory, right? It's never anything that would be taught to kindergartners or first graders or even in high school, because it's a survey course taught in higher education. But it became like this buzzword, right? Critical race theory became the word for teaching Black American history in schools.
Yeah, so weird how that happened.
Right?
Right.
It didn't, well, yeah. And like I said, I didn't understand either. I wrote the article from that point of view. And so there was a lot of people correcting me, some in a very generous way, some not.
Yeah.
And so, I learned a big lesson, and then Dr. Phil called, not himself, but the show.
Crazy.
And asked me to come on and defend my viewpoint on Dr. Phil. Not the new viewpoint that I had learned, but the viewpoint that I wrote about in the article.
And did you agree to defending that old viewpoint, or?
I kind of,
Okay.
They do a really extensive pre-interview for Dr. Phil. So during that pre-interview, I revealed what I had learned since I wrote the article, and that would be what I wanted to talk about. And they were fine with that.
Okay, good.
But it was like 3 people pro and 3 people against. So it was less of me just telling my point of view and more of a debate back and forth across from, these 3 people who were against. And so it was fun. I'm all for a spirited debate. Okay. I enjoy hearing other people's viewpoints, and sometimes I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things, a lot of political viewpoints that I've held that I've realized are old ideas, and that I can be open to looking at new ideas about how to do things. And those are point of views that I embrace from those debates and conversations. So, but this particular thing, my current stance is, yes, we need to learn about all Americans' history in classrooms. Mm-hmm. I don't think it should just be the dominant culture. I don't think it should just be told from the dominant culture's point of view. Mm-hmm. Anybody that has a history, in this body of land in which we live, I think should be taught in school.
Yeah. Which is, to me, really interesting. Like you pointed out, everyone thought critical race theory means teaching history about people other than white people on American soil. Yes. And it's like, well, not at all. And then the idea that it's not being taught either was also kind of crazy, because I'm like, okay, Nevada has one of the worst education systems in the country, and we still learned about it. Like, we know about Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, we learned about all of the horrible shit that happened, and it's like, what do you mean I never learned it? Yeah, we did. It was horrible. So, right. Okay, let's find something that we could debate about. Or at least, what was one of the things specifically that you said your opinion did change recently on a political issue?
Where my opinion changed.
Like maybe reparations, or is that something you ever think about?
Yeah, reparations, I don't quite. So I don't think I know enough about it to make a really informed or to form an informed opinion, but it doesn't really make sense to me that the descendants of Black people at this stage of where we are would be due monies from people. So let me back up. If we were, a day after the Emancipation Proclamation, if we were a year, even 40 years after that,
still within the same generation.
The same generation, or maybe even the children of that generation. That is more clear to me as to how that would work. And maybe that's my point, it's not very clear to me who would pay and how it would work at this point. So I can't quite wrap my head around it.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. I mean, take me, for example. My mom's side of the family, we can trace our male lineage back 10 years. They were here pre-colonial times, pre-Civil War, or pre-Revolutionary War. But then my dad's side of the family, both sides, his mom and dad, came here in the early 1900s. So it's like, am I owed half of my reparations? But then it's like, we can trace my male lineage on my mom's side. None of them were slave owners. So it's like, do we still have to pay our reparations? So it gets into this insane conversation of who is responsible today that had literally no connection at all to it. But,
And there's a really good example here in Los Angeles. There's a beach, and I can't remember Howard's Beach? No. It's Bruce's Beach. Bruce's Beach was a Black-owned beach community that was taken from the people that owned it. It was taken from the family and given to the city. And they were given nothing in return.
Yeah, there was a SWAT episode on something like that too.
Yeah. And so now there's a white Jewish city councilwoman who got wind of this, who started this campaign to give Bruce's Beach back to its original, the families now, the ancestors of the people who owned it. That makes sense to me because those people are still there. They're still in the same area. They have documentation to the effect that this beach was taken from them. It's been noted. It's like, I can see the chain and it makes complete sense to me. And so I just can't wrap my head around the who and the what and who pays. And, if you're white, do you pay a Black person just because you're white and they're Black? Or, and you and I talked about this. My ancestry reveals that I'm basically half white. Probably half of my relatives, my ancestors were slave owners, and the other half were enslaved people.
Yeah. So do you cancel out? You just get nothing?
Yeah. It's confusing, I think. And I'm not saying I'm against it. I can't wrap my head around how it would work.
Because the issue is, and I guess the function of reparations is to have some kind of reconciliation, some kind of acknowledgement of bad in the past and some kind of help to push forward and to make amends, to bring people back up that were put down.
Yes.
And so still finding a way to do that makes sense. But I think when we don't identify what the real goal is and we just debate about reparations itself, we lose a lot of the real meat of the issue. Because then the real meat of the issue isn't, 10 or 5 generations ago. The meat of the issue is now. Like, okay, redlining, all these other things that you said that do have an effect one generation prior. Like the civil rights movement is probably 1, maybe 2 generations ago at most. And before, so there are real, I guess, tragedies that need to be understood better, I guess, and a way to help it. And so that's where I think the talk with critical race theory comes in, the talk with, reparations, but then also the other ways, diversity, equity, inclusion, all these things. What is it? The program to help Black. What is it?
Well, diversity, equity, it's different everywhere, but DEI is usually the name, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're making that DIB now. Diversity, DEB, diversity, equity, and belonging, because people are really tired of the word inclusion.
Yeah.
but all that work, relates to that. And, you and I had touched on affirmative action in our
Affirmative
last
action.
conversation.
Yes.
There's another thing that I wrote an article about, and, about the ending of affirmative action. And my stance on it, it was created in the 60s to basically level the playing field for Black people, just Black people. This was specifically created for Black Americans to have an equal chance at higher education, being that they were from these deeply segregated areas where there were maybe 60 kids to a classroom instead of 18, where you see so these inequities, it was an attempt to address these inequities by saying you must bring in some Black kids to your school of higher education, so that they have a chance at then populating the workforce outside of, blue collar labor.
And this was in the 60s it started, you say?
The 60s.
Cool.
It was never meant to be forever.
Okay.
It was never meant to cover any other race or marginalized person. And so for us now, I think when we hear affirmative action, we hear, everybody that can check a box gets a leg up, right? And so there was a law, and I forgot when it is. It was sometime in the 70s where there was an addition to this that included immigrants, which is one of the things I've changed my stance on. You asked me about that earlier. Immigration is one of the things that I've changed my ideas about.
Okay.
So when it included immigrants, it kind of took away the original purpose, was that Black Americans had basically been hobbled by America, right? Because we've been literally brought here in chains and then enslaved and blah, blah, blah. Let's give them a fair shot. And now it becomes, we want our schools to be a melting pot, so we're going to get some of everybody.
Yeah.
And so when the Supreme Court abolished affirmative action, they actually weren't doing the worst thing possible because it was no longer serving the original purpose.
Interesting. And I could even imagine too, just like the idea of reparations. What are we going to do? We're like too many generations removed. Now it's like, okay, 1960s, Civil Rights Act. We have Lyndon B. Johnson, all of these social welfare programs. We're now 40, 50, 60 years past that. What's the purpose now? So, and also, like you said, now we have, you have to limit how many white people, you have to also include Asians, and it was never meant for that. Okay.
Right. And then anybody who's part anything could claim, like my grandfather was, a Cherokee, so I can claim Native American. And people were getting over on the system that way. I actually do not think it's outlived its original purpose. I do not think that there are enough Black people in the workforce that are equal to our percentage in the country. We're 13% of the country. I do not think that there are an equal number of us in the workforce at that level. That was the original purpose. So I don't think that we did that. But I think because it's now a diversity effort, the original purpose was never going to be, the original goal was never going to be reached with the bill as it was.
Interesting.
That's what I think.
Okay. And so how exactly do you think how has your opinion on immigration changed?
Yeah. So, when Trump was president and I saw those images of kids in cages at the border and he talked about building the border wall, I was so angry and embarrassed for our country. Like, this is what we do. We have the Statue of Liberty that says, send us your tempest tossed, your homeless, yearning to breathe free, send them to us. And then we're caging them at the border and we're building a wall to keep them out. And now, given what we've been dealing with, given that California, where I live, and Los Angeles specifically, is a sanctuary city, I have a completely different opinion on how the border should be run. And I want that wall built. I certainly don't want to see kids in cages. Please don't misunderstand that. But I want a much more stringent procedure at the border so that people are not, it's not an open faucet where people are flowing in. It's horrifying to me.
So you're actually undercover Blacks for Trump. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm not, but I'm not 100% for Joe Biden either, and I'm not for Robert Kennedy Jr. Unfortunately, I wish he were, for me, a viable third candidate, but I don't agree with a lot of his policies, or the policies that he's discussing implementing, and so I guess I'm a moderate, and I don't have a candidate.
What's crazy is most people, I think, are, but then too quick. I mean, I was even having a conversation with my aunt. It was so funny. We got into it, and the first thing she asked was, "Are you pro or anti this? Put me in a box. What are you?" And I'm like, "Auntie, talk to me, girl." Like, so I think this is important, right? Being able to talk to people who seem like, oh, you're Black, family of slaves. We couldn't possibly talk about reparations or immigration without yelling at each other. It's like,
Right.
no, we probably can. Just come at it like a normal person who really wants to understand and be curious without assuming, like, oh, she wants kindergarten children to know that white people are bad and I should be like, fuck no. And I feel like, right, that's kind of the whole point of my book. We generalize. And yeah, it's great. It's survival. It's what we do. But if it's not checked, it leads to horrible shit.
Right. Well, and I think, this is happening in ways that I wish they weren't. But, the Arab community all over the country is protesting. It's not voting. They didn't vote in the primaries, against Joe Biden, who they had put in office in Michigan. And I'm not saying just the Arab communities put Joe Biden in office, but their vote definitely helped. And so there's this wave of people who are like, I'm not going to vote to continue the system as is. I'm not going to vote for either candidate because, and there's an argument to be made if you're a Democrat and you don't vote for Biden, that it is a vote for Trump, but it's not real. And so people, and I'm not saying I'm doing this, but people are like, the system is so broken. The only way that we can fix it is to let it just like blow up and then build. There's no way to pull back toward the center anymore, where a lot of my views lie. Is the center.
And I would imagine without having that proper what to do after, and this has always been the problem with many revolutions, and I was talking with my historian, Dr. Hanania, and all the historians I know, without a formal plan put in place, the revolution is not gonna do shit. Like, it's better to have that system than just toss the board for the most part.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. I mean, I'm terrified at the idea that we don't have a system.
Holy shit. It's like I'm watching Game of Thrones right now. The idea of just anarchy. Oh my gosh. Well, you see it in Haiti right now. Yeah, literally.
In Haiti, it's complete anarchy. The gangs are running the entire country. People are fleeing for their lives. There are bodies in the street. There's no food. There's no water. There are children suffering. Who have no place to go and no way to get out of there. There's some of them at our border right now.
Yeah. And this is interesting. I feel like this could definitely go into a debate about guns because that's a little bit of the reason why the Second Amendment is pretty important. I feel like we are so comforted and coddled in this country. It's insane. Literally south of the border, beheadings outside of resorts, people getting kidnapped and shit. Right? Like the most insane, intricate drug cartels on the planet. Like, there's like people could easily start to overthrow this country. Like, what is it? Joey Diaz says, "Give me 5 bad motherfuckers, we'll take over the country." For real, like, so I don't know. How's your stance on gun control living in California?
Well, for one, I'm a gun owner. I have been for years. I have a handgun.
Cool.
And I know how to use it. Yeah. I don't go very often to the range, but I go often enough so that I can load and shoot with guns going off next to me because I go indoors. It's very upsetting.
Yeah.
But I got a gun during the 1992 civil unrest. Was after Rodney King.
And you were still in LA for that. Oh, shit.
And the city was burning and people were looting. And I was by myself. And I'm like, I don't ever want to feel defenseless again in my own home. For a long time, I was a single mom after my divorce. And I felt a lot more comforted knowing that I had a gun nearby where I could defend myself. So I absolutely believe in gun ownership. I honestly, personally, don't see any reason why weapons of war need to be owned by civilians. And I get that they're fun, but I think I do. I've seen people who really enjoy shooting them. I've witnessed it, and I get that they're fun, but I also know that they can do the most widespread damage in the shortest period of time. You know, me with my handgun, I'm not going to be able to kill as many people as someone with an AK will.
And I guess that would be, I think, the big question that isn't asked in a lot of these conversations about it is, you have a gun. You can't kill as many, but why don't you go out right now and just shoot up a Walmart? I mean, I've got guns. Why don't I do that? So why do you feel like you're a responsible gun owner? And if
that's a legitimate question, and I hear a lot of Republican politicians talking about addressing mental illness versus addressing the guns themselves, and I don't agree that guns shouldn't be addressed. Bump stops and that kind of thing. Like, I think all that should be talked about and restricted. I like the fact that Biden is pushing to close the loophole at gun shows. I don't think anybody should be able to buy a gun without a background check, especially for domestic violence reasons. I don't.
Yeah.
But I'm a safe, responsible gun owner because I am sane. I am. And I think that people, before they're allowed to buy guns, should go through some kind of process to at least check their background and see if they've been institutionalized for mental illness. You know, if they've had arrests where mental illness is an issue, and then evaluate it before they can purchase a gun.
Yeah,
but it's not the gun. It could be a knife. It could be a car. It could be an explosive. It could be a number of things. But guns are easy. And for us, unfortunately, in America, this has been the most prevalent way that masses of people are dying.
Yeah. And for me, I think the main reason why I'm so focused on the mental health and the individual who's doing the crime and not just the tool they use. I mean, I really like guns. I'm super have whatever you want. But also I've studied psychology and behavior analysis, and my thought is, well, we have to look at, why does someone feel the desire? Why would this act of killing people be a reinforcer? Why is that something they would desire? Where's the motivation? And like you said, so for example, the Boston bomber, what was it, in 2016, 2017?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Used a bomb, right?
Yeah.
It was the framework of that person's, I guess, the life of them, what caused them to do what they did. And the real question to me is, how can we, on a nationwide approach, because a lot of school shooters are kids. A lot of shooters are, like you said, mentally not handicapped, but they're fucked up.
Challenged, yeah.
So the real problem, because the easy way out, I definitely see it, is try to ban all guns, but to me that isn't going to happen. So how can we actually have approach where we find the kids who are struggling, or the people who are struggling? Because to me that's the real way to solve it, but incredibly almost impossible. It's how do you think that? How do you think we could solve it?
I mean, it's a hugely challenging. And I think it was President Obama that said, if you want to drive a car, you have to pass the driver's test. If you want to adopt a baby, you have to go through a process. I don't see why it should be anything different if you want to own a gun. I really don't. Not obviously a driver's test, but while there shouldn't be some kind of screening before you own a gun that is specified toward mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, people lie and they check the wrong boxes, but maybe you catch somebody before you put a gun in their hands that's having a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to use that gun in ways that will, either kill themselves or kill other people. So there's a better possibility, I think, if we have a valid screening process, a protocol.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing
and
I've heard.
yeah, I know it's not a catch-all, and I know it, I'm sure I lied on my driver's test for something. I don't know.
One thing I have heard that does make sense is a latency period. I don't see myself as totally against it, but for example, when I bought my guns, every time I had to go through a background check. I mean, I don't have my concealed carry. That's the exception. If you have your concealed carry, they do a even bigger background check on you, and
Right,
then you
right.
get approved for everything without a background check again. I believe, I could be wrong. So at the gun show, because I've heard people say that that's not actually true. I'm not 100% sure, confident enough to talk about it. But for the most part, it seems like we do have a system like that put in place. And it seems like, okay, the kids who are shooting up schools, it's not the guns they own, it's the guns their parents own. So I just keep coming back to what is making these kids so fucked up? Like, is it the school system in general? Because then I feel like the attention is brought to the guns is, I guess, a misinterpreted approach. We got to figure out why are the kids so fucked up? And I think schooling systems, social systems. I mean,
Mhm.
did you?
I think social media is a big thing. I think social media makes kids feel inferior. I think it makes them angry. I think it makes them feel more isolated. Um, and I say them, and I don't mean all kids. Some
Mm-hmm.
kids thrive on social media, but for people who are kind of on the margins anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? To see pictures of what looks like everybody having fun except for you, everybody
Mm-hmm.
invited to X except for you, everybody having like a tight, trim body except for you and showing it off. Like those are the things, the girls, liking these guys, liking those pictures, commenting on them and not commenting on yours.
Mm.
That makes that girl a target, right?
Yeah.
Because this isn't real life. You're not actually seeing this happen.
Mm-hmm.
You're watching it happen on social media. And I think social media, I'm not saying it's an evil, but I think, Florida is not on the wrong track in banning it for kids under 16. I really don't. I don't know exactly how that works. And
Yeah.
my kids are older. So I didn't have to go through that. That would probably be really difficult as a parent, but it needs to be regulated. I think it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
on kids. I think that the drugs that are available right now, the recreational drugs, um, have a lot to do with kids' states of mind. I think people are medicating themselves when they're depressed or anxious and blah, blah, blah. And these drugs that are either their parents or given to them by overly generous psychiatrists are messing with people. Adderall is speed. You give enough of it to kids, and kids, might have a break, a
Mm-hmm.
psychotic break. It's all these things are so readily available that weren't 30 years ago.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed a survivor of the Las Vegas shooting, Heather Salen, and she said, you know, shit, I'm losing where I'm going with it. She said, okay, Columbine was that first issue. Everyone remembered it. It was a big shock. But then something kept ramping up. Like the guns haven't gotten better. It's not like the AR I can buy right now is any different than the AR used in the 60s in Vietnam. It's like the one I have is actually worse, right? And we know Trump banned bump stocks after the Vegas shooting, which is I think people forget about who are super anti-guns and hate Trump. Like, okay, you had a dub for you, but it's like the tools aren't actually changing. It's not like there were only a 10 round magazine in the 60s or whenever Columbine happened, the 80s, 90s, or I really don't know, I forget. It's not like the guns themselves are changing that much to when those first big school shootings happen. But what has is the internet. And I think another interesting thing
Yeah.
would be the prevalence of copycat killers, which is
Mm-hmm.
that's a real issue. It's thought, oh, just on crime shows, it's this interesting thing. Well, the availability of information for so many things is great for the general use of information, but you have this fucked up kid who then sees this and then gets in this echo chamber of maybe this is the way I can solve my problems. So do you
Yes.
think there's any kind of copycat killer thing going on?
I do. I think that people who are able to see, because news is in a flash now, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I saw that OJ died,
Oh, yeah.
and then literally within seconds, 16 of my friends sent me different posts about it. You know, just like, oh my God, can you believe it? It was like rapid fire. Before, with a copycat killer, like in the 70s or 80s, they would read about it in the actual folding, crinkling newspaper that you buy on the stand.
And kids want to read that shit.
Right? Or maybe watch it on the evening news, which is another thing that kids don't do.
Yeah.
Now, because of how readily available everything is and the dark web, where you can find out, right, even more things about how to proceed with these types of killings, like exactly what preparation one might need.
Yeah.
These are the things that feed whatever illness is there, I believe. And I think that, and even just like, I love video games. I mean, I don't love video games, but I like them.
Yeah.
But the way that we operate, like, I just think that kids don't go out and play anymore and socialize that way. We don't have that forced in-person socialization, and maybe it's not good for our heads.
I talked with Dr. Stephen Hayes. He's an amazing psychologist. He said social media is false perspective taking. It's not real. We're not actually getting that real social practice. It's an image, a fake persona put on by everyone else that we then see, and there's no actual relationship taking place between people. So
That's
I guess
right.
we could end it on, you were able to break free and your therapist helped you. You went to the treatment center and you got rid of your addiction problems. But you had this mental shift, right? Looking at things as an opportunity, and I feel like that's a basic way of saying that is the solution for most people, and why I love psychology and want to help get messages of strength and encouragement to people, is, to me, that's the way to have a solution in a complex system like a country, is start with the individuals and then build up. Because as much as we want to have one overarching leadership structure, just tell the bottom how to operate and manage them structurally, that's not the nature of a complex system. We need from the within. So I appreciate you taking your time today, sharing your story. I know you got to go. Maybe we do this in another time, but is there any other last message that you want to end up with?
No, I think what you just said is really beautiful. That shift of perspective, like you talked about, is available for everybody. There needs to be a seeking, and there needs to be probably a willingness, to be open to whatever that shift might be. Because, like, for me, like you said, I was terrified of looking at sleep any other way that I'd been looking at it for most of my life. And then just that one little shift, looking at it differently, changed everything for me.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time. I'm appreciative of this. And, hey, dope soul. This was a dope conversation.
All right. Thank you, Kenny.
All right. Peace out. What up, y'all? Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and slide on over to Amazon and check out my book, Behaving As Us. Add it to your cart, read it, and once you do, drop a review so it can help the Amazon algorithms too. All right, y'all. Peace.